Before people started searching for their doubles and took pictures with them, finding your doppelganger was considered a bad omen. In most cultures, seeing your double was a sign of illness. And meeting it 3 times was most likely a sure sign of your death. This phenomenon was mentioned for the first time in ancient Egypt. They believed that there is a part of the soul called ka that is an identical copy of you in form and carries your memories and feelings and continues to exist after your death. This is why they used to embalm so that the ka finds a place to settle in even after death. In Scandinavian mythology, it is a future image of a person before it happens, but nowadays this phenomenon is known as doppelganger. A German term consisting of 2 syllables, walking and double, which means the existence of 2 copies of the same person. It was mentioned for the first time in a novel by the writer Jean-Paul. After that, the idea of the doppelganger was used in many literary works, films and series. The most famous works are Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Dostoevsky's novel The Double, and the story of William Wilson by Edgar Allan Poe. But the doppelgangers do not exist only in literary and artistic works. Rather, there are many real stories in which people met their doppelganger or their acquaintances' doubles. The poet John Donne.
I was alone in the room after having dinner with some friends. Then one came to me and said, "What is wrong with you, John? You look pale." I told him that I saw my wife pass in front of me in the room carrying a dead child in her arms. He said, "You must have been sleeping. It must have been a dream." No, I was not sleeping. And I am sure because I saw her again. And this time she stood and looked at me and then disappeared.
Donne sent a messenger to his home only to find out that his child had died during childbirth and that his wife was in a bad condition. Queen Catherine II, the Queen, woke up one day to the shock of her ladies-in-waiting, who confirmed that they had seen her sitting on the throne in the royal hall at the same time. The Queen followed them into the hall to find an identical copy of herself sitting on the throne, wearing the same clothes. The Queen thought it was a woman impersonating her and ordered her to be shot. It's not known whether the bullets hit the double or if she simply disappeared. A few weeks later, the Queen died of a stroke. The writer, Johann Wolfgang, was walking one day when he saw something strange that surprised him. He saw himself on a horse, going in the opposite direction, wearing a suit that he did not have, grey with golden threads. Then this entity disappeared. And 8 years later, he was on the same road, and he realized that he was riding the same horse, wearing the same suit that he had seen 8 years ago, and going in the same direction. This was not the only incident that he experienced. He once saw his friend Frederick walking in the street wearing his clothes, and when he returned to his house, he found Frederick waiting for him wearing the same clothes he saw. Frederick said that his clothes got wet because of the rain, so he borrowed some of Johann's clothes. But the most famous doppelganger's story is the story of Emilie Sagee. It happened in 1845. Emilie was a 32-year-old teacher from France. She began working at the age of 16, and although she had a good reputation and is diligent in her work, during the years she taught, she worked in 19 schools. And this number is odd for a diligent and excellent teacher. And for unknown reasons she was always fired, but received a recommendation to work in another school. The reasons for her dismissal were soon to be discovered. The story occurred in a school for nobles in Latvia. The school had 42 students, including Julie, the second daughter of Baron de Guldenstab, who told the story of Emilie. She was 13 at that time. A few weeks after Emilie arrived at school, strange incidents began to happen, and it started small at the beginning. The students would hear that she were in one place, only to find her in another. For example, when they asked about her, it was said that she was in the garden, only to find her coming from the teacher's office, or that she was on the first floor, only to be on the second. At that point the students said that they might be mistaken, but soon it got worse. One day, Emilie was giving a lesson to a class of 13 students, including Julie, and while she was writing on the board, the students suddenly saw 2 of Emilie, one next to the other. They were identical and made the same movements. The only difference was that the real Emilie held a piece of chalk in her hand and actually wrote, while the other only imitated the movements of the first. Shortly after, Emilie helped one of the students put on a dress for a party. The girl turned and looked in the nearby mirror and saw two of Emilie tying her dress. Over the course of months, the incidents continued to repeat themselves, and sometimes the double moved like the original, and sometimes not. When people told Emilie about these strange events, she would say that she did not see anything and did not know what they're talking about. The girls noticed that before the double appeared, Emilie would become pale and look as if she was exhausted. And when it disappeared, Emilie would return to being normal, but she never seen her double. The most recounted incident happened one day when 42 students were embroidering in a large hall, and through the windows, the young girls noticed that Emilie was in the garden collecting the flowers that she was very fond of. In the room there was another teacher. After a while, the lady left the room and left her chair vacant. Suddenly, Emilie appeared sitting in it without anyone seeing her enter the room. The young girls immediately looked at the garden, and Emilie was still picking flowers as she was before. All that they noticed was that she was moving very slowly, as if sleepy or tired. They looked again at the chair and found her sitting there, silent and motionless. Two of the most daring students got up and tried to touch the double. They said they felt a slight resistance as if touching delicate fabric. Then one of them passed in front of the chair and even penetrated a part of the double, but it did not move and did not seem to be affected by this. Finally, it gradually disappeared. Then it was noticed that Emilie resumed actively her mission of collecting flowers. This phenomenon occurred throughout the time that Sagee maintained her position in the school. In the end, the parents began to feel concerned about the strange events that their children told them about. After a year and a half, only 12 students remained out of 42. As a result, Emilie was asked to resign from her position. It was said that she responded in the presence of Julie de Guldenstab that it was the 19th time, and that this was very difficult to bear. When asked what she meant, she admitted that she had been a teacher in 19 different schools. And she entered the first one when she was only 16 years old, and each time she was expelled for the same reason, even though she had never seen her double. After she left school, she went to live with her relative, who had many young children. Mr. Guldenstab, who went to see her there, learned that the children who were about 3 or 4 years old all knew about her doppelganger. And they used to say that they had 2 aunts named Emilie. After that, she moved and no one knew anything about her. This story was told by 3 writers. The first was Robert Dale Owen, quoting only one witness, Julie de Guldenstab, who allowed him to transmit her testimony and publish it on account of Emilie Sagee, followed by Camille Flammarion, who says that he sat with Julie and her brother and heard the story from her himself, then Alexander Aksakov, but the only source is Julie, and some doubted her story and said that she had a wide imagination and was in a family interested in the paranormal, and she may have fabricated the story. Especially since when Camille searched for Emilie Sagee, he did not find someone born with that name. There was someone with similar name. He said that perhaps Julie mistook Emilie's name, or that she changed her name to hide her past, but there was no other testimony or any news from the other 19 jobs about Emilie. Admiral George Tryon. The Admiral's incident is one of the most famous stories of the doppelganger. The Admiral's wife had held a large party for their friends at home. The Admiral was seen coming down the stairs, wearing his military uniform. He walked in front of the guests, looking in front of him. He did not say a word to anyone until he reached the main door. Then he opened it and disappeared after that. But at that time it was impossible for him to be present at the party because he was leading a naval maneuver off the coast of Syria. And it was reported that he gave strange and illogical orders that caused 2 ships to collide with each other. And he and 357 sailors drowned at the same time. Similar incidents continued, and more than one case was reported. They all saw their doubles 3 times, and their deaths followed. Even Abraham Lincoln saw his doppelganger after winning the presidential elections in America in 1860. He was standing in front of the mirror and saw 2 reflections of himself. His face and another copy of his face, but paler. He tried to show this to his wife, but she did not see anything. This happened twice after that while she was not present. At first, she was worried that he was imagining this, but then she thought it was an indication that he would rule for 2 presidential terms. But he was soon killed before his second term ended. Lincoln was not the only case that occurred in America. Cases of seeing doppelgangers continued after that. Linda Derry, the director of the old car harbor in Alabama, who was researching folklore in the South, said that she discovered several stories, all of them similar to Lincoln, and she says that the repeated sightings of doubles, specifically 3 times, always meant that the end was near. And if someone else saw your double, it mostly meant that you might be very ill. In an issue of Sunny South magazine in 1844, there is a story about a county clerk from Car Harbor who was afflicted with malaria. One night, while he was shaking and unable to sleep, he saw a shadow of a man entering his room. When the visitor approached his bed, the clerk saw in the dim light that the face he was looking at was his own. When the same incident occurred the next night, the clerk called 2 friends to confirm his story. The 2 men arrived as quickly as possible. The farmers kept watching their friend as he tried to sleep. They were startled late at night when they saw a copy of the man himself standing near the candlelight. The men approached the doppelganger, who returned to the darkness and disappeared. They never saw the visitor again, and the man died shortly after. There are witnesses and cases of doppelgangers that are too numerous to be denied or ignored. These incidents have baffled scientists, and they have not found a confirmed explanation for them until now. But theories have been put forward to try to explain them. As for the explanations from the spiritual side, it has been said that the doppelganger is a form of astral projection, meaning the ability of a person to transfer his consciousness outside his body and become 2 separate entities. As for the explanations from the psychological side, they said that in cases of mental illness, psychosis, or schizophrenia, the person may hallucinate an image of himself outside his body and believe that he is another person. This theory was tested through an experiment on the left lobe of a patient's brain. The patient saw another copy of herself outside her body. But this does not explain other people seeing the person's double. Another theory proposed by Sigmund Freud is that the doppelganger is the embodiment of the person's subconscious and his hidden desires, and it becomes a physical existence as an exact copy of him. A theory was also proposed about parallel universes, and that perhaps the doppelgangers are people from different dimensions, and that the doppelganger is a copy of the person but from another world. And the person dies because the 2 cannot exist together. As for explanations from the paranormal side, it was said that the doppelgangers are ghosts who have the ability to take any form and incarnate in the image of another person. It was also said that it may be a bad omen or a warning to the person that he will die, and the double appears to him as an indication of his death or a bad accident. It was said that perhaps the jinn or devils are the ones who take the form of the person or possess him. Therefore, he appears as 2 people. Theories have differed about this mysterious phenomenon, but no one has agreed on a definitive explanation for it yet. And perhaps we will never know what causes the doppelgangers to appear. In the end, perhaps the context of your meeting with your double is a decisive factor in how you perceive the situation. If you see him standing in line at a store, it is natural to find the resemblance amusing and perhaps take a picture with him. But your reaction may be very different if you find, for example, when going to bed, that you are already there and asleep.